The room fell silent when Grandpa slid that crumpled check across the table. Everyone laughed, except me. It had my name written on it, but the words underneath made my heart skip. Pay to Zoikanda, $1 million. Dad burst out laughing, nearly spilling his drink. Father, she's a child. What's she going to do with $1 million? Mom added. It's probably blank, he's just teasing again. But Grandpa just smiled faintly, that gentle, mysterious smile he always wore when people underestimated him. He looked at me, ignoring their laughter, and said quietly, Zoe, sometimes what people think is a joke is the only truth left. The next day, everything changed. Zoe was the quiet child, the one who never talked too much or tried to get attention. She loved to sit by the window and draw in her small sketchbook, while her brother Peiko filled the house with noise and laughter. Everyone called Peiko the golden child. He always got the best clothes, the newest phone, and the biggest piece of cake. Their parents proudly showed him off to visitors, talking about his good looks and charm. But when it came to Zoe, they hardly noticed her. If she brought home good grades, they barely said well done. When she made small handmade gifts for them, they tossed them aside like they didn't matter. Every kind act she did was ignored, while Peiko's smallest effort was celebrated. Even her grandfather's love for her seemed to bother them. Grandpa always had a soft spot for Zoe. He would call her my sunshine, and keep her company while she drew, often watching her quietly with a proud smile. But her parents would roll their eyes and whisper, he just pities her. She's his little charity project. One evening, while the family sat at the dinner table, Grandpa pulled a folded, old-looking check from his pocket and placed it in front of Zoe. Everyone turned to look. Her name was written on it in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. Below it were the words, $1 million. For a moment, the room was silent. Then laughter filled the air. Her father laughed so hard he nearly dropped his drink. Father, she's a child. What's she going to do with $1 million? He said, still laughing. Her mother added, it's obviously fake. He's teasing again like always. Peiko chuckled too, shaking his head. Lucky you, sis. Maybe one day your drawings will be worth something. Zoe just sat there, holding the check with both hands. She didn't understand why everyone found it so funny. She looked up at Grandpa, who wasn't laughing. He was just smiling, that soft, knowing smile of his. Then he said in a calm voice, Zoe, sometimes what people think is a joke is the only truth left. Nobody paid attention to his words. They kept laughing, calling it the funniest thing Grandpa ever did. But Zoe couldn't forget what he said. That night, she placed the check carefully inside her sketchbook and hid it in her drawer. Deep inside, she felt something strange, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, Grandpa wasn't joking at all. The morning after Grandpa passed away, Zoe woke up to shouting. The house that was usually calm now sounded like a storm. Her aunts, uncles, and cousins were arguing loudly in the living room. Everyone was angry about the will. Some said Grandpa had lost his mind before he died. Others claimed he had promised them money or property. It was ugly and painful. Zoe stood quietly in the hallway, clutching her sketchbook to her chest, afraid to go in. When she finally stepped closer, she saw her parents sitting with angry faces. Her mother's eyes were red, and her father was pacing the floor. He didn't leave us a single thing, her mother shouted at the lawyer. We took care of him. How could he forget us? The lawyer, a calm older man in glasses, simply sighed and shuffled through his papers. Mr. Kanda was very clear with his wishes, he said softly. He knew exactly what he was doing. Zoe didn't understand what was happening. She stood in a corner unnoticed as the argument grew louder. Then the lawyer looked up and called her name gently, Zoe Kanda? Everyone stopped talking. Her parents turned toward her, confused. The lawyer reached into his briefcase and took out a small brown envelope. Your grandfather left this for you, he said. The room fell silent again. Her mother frowned. For her? Zoe slowly stepped forward and took the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written neatly on the front in Grandpa's handwriting. She opened it carefully, her heart pounding. Inside was the same old check he had once given her at dinner, the one everyone had laughed about, and a small folded note. She opened it and read the message in his familiar, shaky handwriting. Take this to the bank. And remember, believe in what others mock. Zoe blinked, unsure what it meant. Before she could say anything, her mother snatched the envelope from her hand. "Oh, not this nonsense again," she snapped. "It's worthless. Don't embarrass us by showing up at a bank with this." Her father nodded in agreement. He was old, Zoe. He didn't know what he was doing. "Forget about it." Zoe felt her chest tighten. She wanted to believe her mother, but something deep inside her whispered that Grandpa meant every word. His voice echoed in her mind. Sometimes what people think is a joke is the only truth left. That night, when everyone was asleep, Zoe pulled the check out again from her drawer. She traced her name on it with her finger and stared at the note. She didn't know what waited for her at the bank, but one thing she knew for sure: she had to go. Zoe reached the bank early that morning, her heart beating fast. She had barely slept, thinking about Grandpa's note. The check was folded neatly inside her pocket, and she kept touching it, afraid it might disappear. She stood in line quietly, surrounded by people who looked busy and confident, while she felt small and unsure. When it was her turn, she walked up to the teller, a kind-looking woman with glasses, and handed her the check. The teller took one look and frowned slightly. She flipped it over, looked again, and then blinked twice. "Can you please wait a moment?" she said politely. Zoe nodded nervously. The teller whispered something to another employee, and soon the bank manager appeared. He was an older man with gray hair and a calm face. He took the check from the teller and examined it carefully. Zoe's hands were shaking as she tried to explain. "My grandpa gave me this before he died. He told me to bring it here." The manager didn't respond right away. Instead, he made a quick phone call and asked her to sit down. Zoe's stomach twisted as she watched them talk quietly in the corner. She thought maybe her parents were right. Maybe this really was a joke. Maybe she would look foolish for believing it. But before her thoughts could spiral, the manager returned and smiled gently. "Miss Kanda," he said, "this check is valid. But it's not what it seems. It's not for $1 million, it's a key." Zoe frowned in confusion. "A key?" she asked softly. The manager nodded and motioned for her to follow him. They walked through a quiet hallway to a small private office. On the table sat a large safety deposit box with the initials ZK carved on it. Zoe's breath caught when she saw her initials. The manager handed her a small form to sign, then slowly opened the box in front of her. Inside were several neatly arranged documents tied with ribbons, a sealed envelope, and a small wooden pendant carved with delicate patterns. Zoe stared at them, speechless. The manager smiled kindly and said, "Your grandfather prepared this a long time ago. Everything inside belongs to you." Zoe touched the pendant gently. It felt warm, almost alive, like a piece of Grandpa's love had been hidden there. In that quiet moment, she finally understood. This was no joke. Grandpa had left her something far greater than money. Zoe carefully opened the envelope from the safety deposit box. Inside was a folded letter, written in Grandpa's familiar, shaky handwriting. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it, and her eyes scanned the words slowly, as if trying to believe what she was reading. "Zoe, everyone thought I was losing my mind after your grandmother passed, but I built something, a business under your name. Every design you drew as a child, I turned into textile patterns. The world loved them. The profits are all yours." Her heart skipped a beat. She read it again, just to be sure she hadn't imagined it. Every sketch she had drawn as a little girl, the flowers, the abstract shapes, the tiny patterns she had made for fun, had been used by Grandpa to build a real business. He had turned her innocent drawings into designs for textiles, fabrics, and clothing that people actually bought and loved. The idea that something she had created as a child could make her a fortune felt unreal. Zoe held the letter tightly, her eyes filling with tears. She had always thought her drawings were just small, silly things. No one had ever praised them, and her parents had ignored her talent completely. But Grandpa had seen the potential in her, even when everyone else didn't. He had quietly worked behind the scenes, building a business empire using her creativity, and he had done it all in her name. She looked at the wooden pendant again, turning it over in her hands. It wasn't just a pretty object. It was a symbol, a key to the life her grandfather had prepared for her. The check he had handed her that night, which everyone had laughed at, was not fake at all. It was a way to access a fortune she had no idea existed. Zoe's mind raced as she imagined the world outside, where people were wearing clothes she had unknowingly inspired. The profits, the properties, the trust, everything belonged to her, just as Grandpa had promised. It felt like a secret universe had been waiting for her all these years, hidden from everyone else, especially her parents and Peiko. For the first time in her life, Zoe felt seen. Not by her family, not by teachers, not by anyone who had overlooked her. Only by Grandpa, who had believed in her when no one else did. She whispered softly to herself, "It wasn't a joke, it was my future." And for the first time, a small spark of hope and pride lit up her heart, stronger than she had ever felt before. When Zoe's parents learned about the hidden fortune, their faces twisted with anger. They couldn't believe that all those years of ignoring her, dismissing her talents, and praising Peiko had led to this. Her mother grabbed the letter and the pendant, waving them as if they were proof of some unfair trick. "You're too young to handle this," she shouted, her voice sharp. "Your grandfather was old, he didn't know what he was doing. You can't possibly manage all this money." Her father nodded angrily, pacing the floor. "We should control it. This is family money, not hers." Zoe felt a cold lump in her stomach. She had hoped they might be happy for her, or at least curious to see what Grandpa had done. But instead, they only wanted power and control. The lawyer, a calm man who had worked with Grandpa for years, tried to explain. "Your father and mother," he said gently. "Your grandfather planned for Zoe to access everything only when she turned 21. He set up legal measures so that unless you voluntarily give up your rights as guardians, you cannot claim control over the funds. This was intentional." Her parents' faces turned red with fury. They muttered under their breath and shot angry glares at Zoe. That day, everything at home changed. Zoe felt the warmth and comfort of her parents disappear. They no longer helped with school supplies or paid her tuition on time. Her phone, which had been her little escape to the outside world, was taken away. Each day, she was forced to do endless chores, cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, while Peiko lounged in the living room, playing games, texting friends, and eating whatever he wanted. Zoe's world had become a battlefield. Every word from her parents carried judgment and anger, as if they wanted her to feel small. Peiko would sneer whenever he saw her trying to read or study, saying cruel things like, "You think Grandpa made you rich? You're just holding money for the real heirs, us." Even though her heart ached and her hands were sore from chores, Zoe clung tightly to the pendant and Grandpa's letter. Those small items were her secret, her hope, and her strength. Every time she felt defeated or lonely, she would trace her initials on the pendant and whisper to herself, "I just have to wait." Grandpa knew what he was doing. Despite the coldness around her, Zoe began to understand that her future was in her own hands, and no one, not her parents, not Peiko, could take away the life Grandpa had quietly prepared for her. For years, Zoe's life was not easy. Her parents ignored her accomplishments and treated her like she was invisible. Every day, she endured their constant nagging, unfair rules, and endless chores. Peiko, on the other hand, enjoyed every privilege imaginable. He got the best clothes, the newest gadgets, and the freedom to do whatever he wanted. Sometimes he would walk past Zoe with a smirk and say cruel things like, "You really think Grandpa made you rich? You're just holding money for the real heirs, us." Even though the words hurt, Zoe didn't respond. She knew arguing would only make things worse. Instead, she focused on what she could control. She studied hard, finishing her homework quietly while Peiko played games in the living room. She also took on small part-time jobs whenever she could, delivering packages, tutoring younger kids, helping at a local shop. Every coin she earned went into saving for her future, though no one at home noticed. Her nights were the hardest. After a long day of chores, school, and work, she would sit on her small bed and open the wooden pendant Grandpa had left her. She would trace the carvings with her fingers, feeling the warmth and care that had been put into it. It was the only piece of love and belief from her grandfather she still had, and it reminded her that she was not alone. Sometimes the loneliness and mockery were almost too much to bear. She would cry quietly in the bathroom or under her blanket, wishing someone would see her, believe in her, or tell her she was more than what her parents and Peiko made her feel. But then she would pick up the pendant again and read Grandpa's note in her mind, "Believe in what others mock." On those nights, she would whisper to herself, "It's not a joke. I just have to wait." That simple sentence became her mantra. She reminded herself that her fortune and her future were not gone. They were simply waiting for the right time. Years passed, and though the mockery never stopped and the loneliness lingered, Zoe grew stronger. She learned patience, resilience, and careful planning. Every book she read, every extra shift she worked, every secret sketch she kept saved for herself, brought her closer to the day she would finally step into the life Grandpa had prepared for her. Even when everything around her seemed against her, she held on tightly to hope, believing that one day, everything would change. That on the morning of her 21st birthday, Zoe woke up with a strange mix of excitement and dread. She had waited for this day for years, the day she could finally access everything Grandpa had left her. But instead of joy, she found herself trapped. Her parents had locked all the doors and refused to let her leave. They were determined to stop her from meeting the lawyer, who would finally give her control over the fortune. Paco stood near the living room, arms crossed and a smug grin on his face. "You're not leaving until you transfer that account to Dad's name," he sneered. His voice was cold and mocking, like he enjoyed seeing her struggle even on what should have been a special day. Zoe felt anger rise inside her, but she didn't say a word. She had expected this, and she had prepared for it. For weeks, she had quietly made a plan. She had remembered an old friend from school who lived nearby, someone she could trust completely. They had arranged to meet tonight, under the cover of darkness. While her parents believed she was trapped, she had already packed a small bag. Nothing but her pendant, Grandpa's letter, and a few essentials. Everything else could wait. As night fell, Zoe waited until the house grew quiet. She heard her parents arguing in the other room, Paco laughing loudly as if he had won. Carefully, she crept to the back of the house, where a small window led to the garden. Her heart pounded, but she stayed calm, remembering all the years of struggle, loneliness, and mockery. She whispered to herself, "This is the moment. Grandpa believed in me, and I won't fail him." With slow, steady movements, she opened the window and climbed out. The cool night air brushed against her face, filling her with a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. Her friend was waiting quietly, holding a small bag of supplies. Together, they moved quickly but silently through the shadows. Zoe clutched the pendant tightly in one hand, and the letter in the other. Every step felt like reclaiming a part of herself that had been stolen by her parents' greed and Paco's arrogance. That night, Zoe finally felt the first taste of independence. She was no longer a powerless child in her parents' house. She was a young woman on her own, ready to claim the life her grandfather had promised her. The struggles of the past years had not broken her. They had prepared her for this moment. For the first time, Zoe felt that real freedom, and she knew nothing could stop her now. Zoe arrived at the bank just as the sun was rising, the city still quiet around her. She felt a mixture of nerves and excitement in her chest, knowing that today everything would finally change. As she stepped inside, the familiar smell of polished wood and paper brought back memories of the first time she had walked through these doors. She looked around and saw the manager from years ago, now older, with a few more gray hairs, but the same kind smile on his face. "Miss Kanda," he said warmly, "we've been waiting for you." His voice carried a calm confidence that made Zoe feel safe, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She smiled back nervously, clutching the pendant and the letter from Grandpa. For so many years, she had carried hope in her heart, and now it was time to see what her grandfather had built for her. They walked together to the private office, and the manager carefully opened the same safety deposit box that had held her first secret. But this time, the contents were different. Instead of just the small envelope and pendant, the box was filled with neatly organized documents, contracts with designers and companies, and property deeds. Zoe's hands shook as she picked up each piece, realizing that everything Grandpa had promised was real. The manager smiled and explained, "All of this belongs to you, Miss Kanda. Your grandfather built a trust that allowed the business to grow safely over the years. You are now the sole owner of Zila Textiles." Zoe's eyes widened. She could hardly believe it. The clothing designs she had drawn as a child had turned into patterns used across Africa, seen and loved by thousands. Every sketch she thought was small or silly had become part of a thriving fashion empire, and she was finally recognized as the rightful owner. Zoe sat quietly for a moment, touching the pendant in her hand. She thought of the years of struggle, the mockery, and the waiting. All of it had led to this moment, a moment of triumph and proof that her grandfather had always believed in her, even when no one else did. She could now make decisions, manage the business, and take control of her future. The manager handed her a folder with all the official papers and contracts, and Zoe held them close. She finally understood that the life she had dreamed of, the life Grandpa had quietly prepared, was hers to step into. Every drawing, every small effort she had made as a child, had been part of something much bigger. For the first time, she felt proud, strong, and completely free. When Zoe drove back to her old home in her new car, a sleek, shiny vehicle that gleamed in the afternoon sun, she felt a strange mix of emotions, calm satisfaction, and a quiet strength she had never known before. The house looked the same, but everything inside would feel different now. As she stepped out of the car, she could hear her parents laughing in the garden, talking loudly with their friends, pretending life had gone on as usual. The moment they saw her, the laughter stopped. Her mother's face went pale, and she stammered, "Zoe darling, you know we were only joking back then." Her words were weak, uncertain, as if she didn't know what to say next. Her father tried to regain control, clearing his throat. "We just wanted to protect you. You're too young to handle everything." Even Peiko, who had spent years mocking her, nervously stepped forward and held out his arms as if to hug her. Zoe looked at them all calmly. She didn't feel the old anger or frustration. She simply shook her head slightly, holding the pendant in her hand for a brief second, remembering Grandpa's belief in her. Then, in a soft but steady voice, she said, "You laughed at the only person who believed in me. Now I laugh at what you called a joke." Her words hung in the air, cutting through the shock and confusion on their faces. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam the door or argue. She just turned around slowly and walked away, her new life waiting outside those walls. Every step she took felt lighter than the last, like years of pain and mockery were falling behind her. For the first time, she felt in control, proud and unafraid. Her parents and Peiko stood frozen in the garden, unable to respond. They had spent years thinking they had power over her, that they could control her future. But now, standing in front of the girl they had ignored, mocked and underestimated, they realized the truth. Zoe had grown stronger, smarter, and unstoppable. Her calm departure, her quiet confidence, and the subtle glance at the pendant around her neck spoke louder than any shouting or argument ever could. Zoe walked past the familiar gate and down the street, each step echoing a new beginning. Her silence was her strength, her revenge, and her victory. Sometimes, she knew, the loudest way to show someone they were wrong is not with anger or words, but by simply rising above them, living the life they never believed you could. And today, Zoe had done exactly that. Months after taking full control of her life in Zila Textiles, Zoe was cleaning and organizing her new home, a space that finally felt truly hers. Everything reminded her of Grandpa, his framed photographs, his old books, and the desk he had once sat at for hours, writing letters and plans. As she carefully sorted through drawers and papers, her hand brushed against the wooden pendant he had given her so many years ago. She picked it up, feeling its familiar warmth, and as she shifted it in her hand, it slipped and fell to the floor with a soft thud. The moment it hit the ground, the pendant cracked open, revealing a tiny folded note hidden inside. Zoe's heart skipped a beat as she unfolded it. Written in Grandpa's familiar handwriting were the words, "One day they'll laugh again, but this time, you'll be the reason." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of understanding and joy. For the first time, she truly grasped the depth of what Grandpa had given her. It wasn't just money, a business, or even the freedom to live her own life. He had left her something far more powerful, faith in herself, faith that no matter how others doubted, mocked, or ignored her, she had the strength to turn what seemed like a joke or a setback into destiny. Zoe held the note close to her chest, remembering all the years of struggle, the nights she cried quietly, the chores she endured, and the sneers she survived. Every moment had been preparing her for this, a life where she was no longer invisible, where her creativity was celebrated, and where her grandfather's quiet belief in her had blossomed into reality. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and a soft smile spread across her face. She finally understood Grandpa's gentle words from so many years ago, the ones she had carried in her heart like a secret flame. Sometimes the smallest spark of faith can light the darkest nights. She looked around her new home, at the thriving business, the designs she had created, and the life she had built, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Grandpa hadn't just left her a fortune. He had left her a lesson in patience, belief, and resilience. A lesson that had turned every doubt, every laugh at her expense, into the stepping stones of her destiny. For Zoe, the pendant wasn't just a keepsake anymore. It was a reminder that faith, love, and quiet determination can turn even the smallest seed of hope into a life beyond imagination. They laughed when he gave her a fake check, but he had already written her real future on it. If you love Zoe's story, hit like, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe for more amazing tales where courage and patience turn dreams into reality.